Dr. Eleanor Reed stared at her reflection in the pristine windows of the Global Science Initiative's Botanical Research Wing, absently adjusting her lab coat. The setting sun cast long shadows across the hydroponic gardens where, among Earth's native species, several alien plant specimens thrived under carefully controlled conditions. But Eleanor's attention wasn't on the rare extraterrestrial flora she'd spent years studying, it was fixed on the striking figure working diligently in the adjacent laboratory. Nyxera moved with an otherworldly grace that made even the simple act of adjusting a microscope seem like a choreographed dance. Her iridescent skin shifted between deep purple and midnight blue, and the delicate fins that framed her face rippled gently in response to changes in air pressure. She had arrived 6 months ago as part of the first wave of Xylaxian scientists allowed to work alongside humans, and Eleanor had been instantly fascinated. "Just do it already," muttered Dr. Raj Patel, Eleanor's research partner and self-appointed voice of reason. He leaned against their shared workstation, pretending to analyze data while actually watching Eleanor's internal struggle with barely concealed amusement. "You've been practicing that dinner invitation in your head for weeks. The poor alien probably thinks you're malfunctioning with all the strange looks you keep giving her." Eleanor shot him a glare. "It's not that simple, Raj. We barely understand Xylaxian social customs. What if dinner invitations are considered offensive? Or worse, what if they're considered a marriage proposal? Then congratulations on your upcoming interstellar wedding," Raj grinned, dodging the crumpled paper Eleanor threw at him. "Seriously though, she's been studying human culture just as much as we've been studying theirs. I'm sure she understands the concept of casual dining." Eleanor took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Fine. Fine. I'm doing it. Right now. Before I lose my nerve." She crossed the laboratory with forced confidence, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nyxera looked up as she approached, her large, multifaceted eyes shifting through a spectrum of colors before settling on a warm gold, a reaction Eleanor had never seen before. "Dr. Reed," Nyxera's voice carried an ethereal quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your biorhythms appear elevated. Is everything all right?" "Yes. I mean, everything's fine," Eleanor managed, trying not to fixate on the fact that Xylaxians could apparently read human vital signs. "I actually wanted to ask you something. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" The reaction was instantaneous and completely unexpected. Nyxera's fins flared wide, her skin blazing with patterns of bioluminescence that Eleanor had never seen before. The alien scientist took 3 precise steps backward, her movements suddenly rigid and formal. "You cannot know what you ask," Nyxera's voice had dropped an octave, resonating with a depth that made the nearby glassware vibrate. "This changes everything." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend." "Offense is not the issue, Dr. Reed," Nyxera interrupted, her eyes now cycling through colors so rapidly it was dizzying to watch. "But now that the invitation has been extended, protocols must be followed. Meet me at these coordinates at sunset." A series of numbers appeared on Eleanor's tablet, though Nyxera hadn't moved. Before Eleanor could respond, Nyxera had swept from the lab, leaving behind only a faint trail of bioluminescent particles that slowly faded into nothing. The entire exchange had lasted less than a minute. Raj appeared at Eleanor's side, looking as bewildered as she felt. Okay, that was definitely not a normal reaction to dinner plans. He peered at the coordinates on her tablet. "These lead to the old observatory on Mount Wilson. What could she possibly?" "Dr. Reed?" A new voice interrupted them. They turned to find Director Hammond, the head of Xenoscientific Relations, standing in the doorway. His face was ashen. "My office. Now." Eleanor followed the director, her mind racing. In the 6 months since first contact, she'd never seen him look so shaken. As the door to his office slid shut behind them, he turned to face her with an expression of mingled awe and terror. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked, sinking into his chair. "The Xylaxian High Command just contacted us. Directly. Do you know how unprecedented that is?" Eleanor shook her head mutely. "They're sending a delegation. Tonight." Apparently, he laughed somewhat hysterically. "You've just triggered some kind of first contact protocol that they've been waiting centuries to initiate. Whatever Nyxera is, and we just found out she's not just a scientist, she's been watching us. Waiting for someone to." He consulted his tablet, extend the invitation of shared sustenance with pure intent. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "I just wanted to ask her to dinner." "Well, congratulations, Dr. Reed," Director Hammond said, rubbing his temples. "Your dinner invitation just made you humanity's first official representative to the Galactic Council. And apparently, we've been under evaluation this entire time." As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, Eleanor stood in her apartment, staring at her closet with mounting panic. How does one dress for an accidental diplomatic incident? What does one wear to potentially determine the fate of human-alien relations? Her tablet chimed with another message from Director Hammond: "Whatever you do tonight, don't refuse anything they offer you. The fate of Earth might literally depend on this dinner." Eleanor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere between asking a coworker to dinner and sunset, she'd stumbled into what appeared to be the most important first date in human history. And she had absolutely no idea what to expect. The old Mount Wilson Observatory loomed against the darkening sky, its dome silhouetted by the last rays of sunset. Eleanor's autonomous vehicle pulled up to the entrance, its quiet hum falling silent as she stepped out. Her sensible black dress and jacket suddenly felt inadequate for what had become an impromptu diplomatic mission. The observatory's entrance opened before she could reach it, revealing not the dusty interior she expected, but a softly illuminated corridor that definitely hadn't been there during her previous visits. The walls pulsed with an organic light that responded to her presence, creating a path forward. "Welcome, Dr. Reed," Nyxera's voice echoed from somewhere ahead. "Please join us." Us. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat as she followed the living light. The corridor opened into what should have been the observatory's main chamber, but instead revealed a vast space that defied the building's external dimensions. The domed ceiling had become transparent, revealing a star-filled sky more vivid than any Eleanor had ever seen, even from this mountain height. Around a crystalline table that seemed to grow from the floor sat 3 figures. Nyxera, her bioluminescent patterns now forming complex, shifting geometries across her skin, stood as Eleanor entered. Beside her were 2 other Xylaxians, one whose skin rippled with deep crimson patterns, the other emanating a cold, silvery light. "Eleanor Reed," Nyxera announced formally, "I present to you archivists Vexthor and Kielzen of the Galactic Council's Observation Division." Her multifaceted eyes fixed on Eleanor. "And I am not merely Nyxera the researcher, but Nyxera, first observer of Sol System and evaluator of Species 7249, Humanity." Eleanor's diplomatic training kicked in, surprising even herself. She bowed slightly, remembering Director Hammond's briefing. "I am honored by your presence," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The crimson-patterned Xylaxian, Vexthor, made a sound like crystal wind chimes. "She maintains composure even as her world-view shatters." "Fascinating." As expected, Kielzen added, silver light pulsing. The subject's psychological profile indicated high adaptability. "Please," Nyxera gestured to an empty chair that grew from the floor, "be seated. There is much to discuss." Eleanor sat, noting that the chair adjusted perfectly to her human form. Before her, the crystalline table's surface came alive with holographic images, scenes from human history, scientific achievements, cultural moments. "How long have you been watching us?" "Since your first nuclear detonation," Vexthor answered. "It caught our attention. Most species destroy themselves at this stage. You didn't. Instead, Kielsen continued, you turned that knowledge to power generation, medical advancement, space exploration. Unusual. Promising. We've been waiting, Nyxera added, her patterns shifting to something gentler, for the right moment, the right human, to make first true contact. Your dinner invitation, Eleanor Reed, was more significant than you knew. It demonstrated something we've long suspected about humanity. Eleanor watched as her own memories appeared above the table, her years of work with alien botanical samples, her careful studies, her genuine curiosity about other life forms. What did it demonstrate? That humans are capable of seeing beyond physical differences, beyond fear, to forge genuine connections. Nyxera's fins rippled with what Eleanor now recognized as emotion. Your invitation wasn't diplomatic or strategic. It was personal. A quality rare among spacefaring species, Vexthor noted. Most achieve technological advancement at the cost of emotional intelligence. Humans have managed both. But now, Kielsen's silver light dimmed ominously, we face a crisis. One that your invitation has unexpectedly pushed to the forefront. The holographic display shifted, showing a massive object moving through deep space. Eleanor leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her anxiety. What am I looking at? The Nexus, Nyxera said softly. A construct of the first ones, those who came before even us. It's awakening for the first time in 1,000,000 years, and its path. The image zoomed out, showing a trajectory that made Eleanor's blood run cold. It's heading for Earth. We don't know its purpose, Vexthor admitted. The first ones left no manual, no instructions. Only the Nexus itself, and the knowledge that it appears when species reach a crucial developmental stage. Your dinner invitation, Nyxera continued, her patterns now pulsing with urgency, triggered our protocols because it proved humanity's readiness for the truth. The Nexus arrives in 30 days, Eleanor. And humanity's response to it will determine not just Earth's fate, but your species' place in the galaxy. Eleanor stared at the massive construct, its scale defying comprehension. What do you need from me? Something unprecedented, Nyxera's eyes shifted to a deep blue. We need you to help us understand humanity well enough to prepare Earth for the Nexus's arrival. And, she hesitated, we need you to keep working with us even knowing what we really are. You mean keep having dinner with you? Eleanor asked, a hint of her earlier nervousness returning. For the first time, Nyxera's patterns showed something like amusement. Yes, Eleanor Reed. Though perhaps with slightly higher stakes than you originally intended. The holographic display shifted again, showing Earth from orbit. Eleanor watched her home planet spin slowly, realizing that everything, her work, her life, her simple dinner invitation, had led to this moment. Whatever the Nexus was, whatever it wanted, humanity's first steps into a larger galaxy now rested partially on her shoulders. Well, she said, straightening in her chair, I suppose we should order dinner then. We have a lot to discuss. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity that transformed the Global Science Initiative into the unofficial headquarters of Earth's first contact preparations. Eleanor found herself at the center of it all, bridging the gap between human and Xylaxian understanding while the clock ticked relentlessly toward the Nexus's arrival. Tonight, she stood in the transformed Botanical Research Wing, watching Nyxera interface with a holographic display of the approaching construct. The alien's bioluminescent patterns had taken on a frantic rhythm that Eleanor had learned to recognize as deep concern. The Nexus has accelerated, Nyxera announced, her fins quivering. We now have 6 days, not 9. Dr. Raj Patel, who had been cleared for the project given his expertise in xenobotany, looked up from his workstation. That's going to complicate the global announcement plan. Eleanor rubbed her temples, fighting exhaustion. They'd spent weeks preparing humanity for the revelation of both the Xylaxians' true nature and the approaching Nexus. World leaders had been briefed, scientific communities had been mobilized, and tomorrow would mark the first global broadcast explaining everything to the public. There's something else, Nixera's voice carried an unfamiliar tension. The Council has reviewed our progress, and they're concerned. Concerned about what? Eleanor asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. About my objectivity. Nixera's patterns shifted to deep blues and purples. About our dinners. Those dinners had become a nightly ritual, necessary strategy sessions that had evolved into something more. Each evening, Eleanor and Nixera would discuss humanity's preparation for the Nexus, but inevitably their conversations would drift to personal matters, their different perspectives on life, their hopes, their fears. Eleanor had learned that Xylaxians experienced emotions just as deeply as humans, though they expressed them differently. Nixera had discovered that human intuition often succeeded where pure logic failed. They're sending an overseer, Nixera continued. Talvon arrives tomorrow, just before the global announcement. Raj whistled low. Perfect timing. A soft chime interrupted them. Director Hammond's holographic form materialized in the center of the lab. Dr. Reed, we have a situation. Military satellites have detected unusual activity in the upper atmosphere. Something's coming through. The overseer isn't waiting until tomorrow. Nixera's patterns flared with alarm. This is unprecedented. The lab's ceiling transformed into a viewing screen, showing a disturbance in Earth's atmosphere. A vessel unlike anything Eleanor had seen before, far more angular and imposing than Xylaxian craft, descended through the clouds. Its surface rippled with aggressive red energy patterns that made Nixera's fins flatten against her head. Talvon brings a war vessel, she whispered. This is wrong. The Overseer class never militarizes first contact situations. The ship landed on the Institute's grounds with a resonating hum that made Eleanor's teeth ache. Moments later, a Xylaxian unlike any she'd seen strode into the lab. Where Nixera's movements were fluid and graceful, Talvon moved with mechanical precision. Their skin emitted harsh, sharp patterns of crimson and black. First observer Nixera, Talvon's voice grated like metal on stone. You are relieved of duty. The Council has determined that your emotional attachment to the subject species has compromised the observation protocol. With respect, Overseer, Nixera stepped forward, her patterns blazing with defiance. My connection with humanity has deepened our understanding of their potential. The Nexus approaches precisely because they are ready. The Nexus approaches, Talvon corrected, because they have advanced technologically. Their emotional volatility makes them dangerous. We have reviewed your reports, Nixera. These humans react with violence to fear, with aggression to uncertainty. They are not ready. That's not fair, Eleanor interjected, earning a sharp look from the Overseer. Yes, humanity has those capacities, but we also have the ability to overcome them. Our history is full of examples where understanding triumphed over fear, where cooperation defeated conflict. You prove my point, human. Talvon's patterns pulsed with dismissal. You speak from emotion, not logic. The Council has reached its decision. When the Nexus arrives, humanity will be placed under quarantine. No further contact with galactic civilization will be permitted until you evolve beyond your primitive emotional responses. No, Nixera's voice carried a harmonics Eleanor had never heard before. I invoke the right of advocacy. By our oldest laws, a first observer may challenge an overseer's judgment through demonstration. Talvon's patterns registered surprise. You would risk your position in the Council for these humans? I would risk everything for the truth, Nixera replied. She turned to Eleanor, her eyes cycling through deep, meaningful colors. The global announcement tomorrow, let me handle it differently than planned. Let me show the Council, through humanity's response, that emotion and logic can coexist. That they must coexist. Eleanor looked between Nixera and Talvon, understanding that far more than dinner plans hung in the balance now. This was about humanity's future, about their place in the galaxy, about the very nature of progress itself. And somehow, her simple dinner invitation had set it all in motion. "What do you need from us?" she asked Nyxera. "Trust." Nyxera's patterns settled into a calm, determined configuration. "And perhaps, one more dinner. We have 6 days to prove that humanity's greatest strength lies not in their ability to suppress emotion, but in their capacity to feel deeply and still choose wisdom." Talvon watched this exchange with obvious disapproval, but even the overseer was bound by the ancient laws Nyxera had invoked. "You have until the Nexus arrives," they conceded. "But when humanity reacts with panic and violence to tomorrow's revelation, remember that you chose this path." As Talvon left the lab, Eleanor turned to Nyxera. "Please tell me you have a plan." "I do." Nyxera's patterns shifted to include hints of gold, a color Eleanor had only seen that first day, when she'd extended her dinner invitation. "But you're not going to like it." The global broadcast began at dawn, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of carefully prepared statements from world leaders or scientific explanations, billions of screens across Earth lit up with a direct neural feed from Nyxera's consciousness. Every human on the planet simultaneously experienced her memories, her feelings, her perspective on humanity's journey. They saw Earth through her eyes, a brilliant blue jewel harboring a species that refused to follow predictable patterns. They felt her wonder at human art, her confusion at human contradictions, her growing understanding that what the Council saw as flaws were actually humanity's greatest strengths. And they felt something else, something that made Talvon's patterns flash with alarm. They experienced what it felt like when a Xylaxian fell in love with humanity's potential. Eleanor stood in the Institute's main auditorium, watching the reactions unfold on screens showing crowds around the world. Where Talvon had predicted panic, there was awe. Where they had expected violence, there was revelation. Humans weren't just seeing aliens for the first time, they were understanding them. "Impossible," Talvon's harsh voice cut through the moment. "You've manipulated the feed, clouded their minds with emotional impulses." "No," Nyxera responded calmly, her patterns rippling with certainty. "I've shown them truth. Raw, unfiltered truth. Their response proves what I've been trying to tell the Council: humanity's emotional capacity isn't a weakness. It's the key to their understanding." The next 5 days transformed Earth. As the Nexus drew closer, humanity didn't descend into chaos, they unified. Scientists worldwide began collaborating with Xylaxian researchers. Artists created works that merged human and alien perspectives. Children drew pictures of bioluminescent friends while philosophers debated the nature of consciousness across species. But it was the dinner parties that struck Eleanor the most. All across the globe, humans began inviting each other into their homes, sharing meals, discussing their experience of Nyxera's memories. The simple act that had started everything was being repeated millions of times, building bonds of understanding that transcended old divisions. On the final night before the Nexus's arrival, Eleanor and Nyxera shared one last meal in the transformed observatory. The crystalline table was set with both human and Xylaxian dishes, a symbolic fusion of their worlds. "The Council has been monitoring Earth's response," Nyxera said, her patterns showing complex emotions. "They've never seen anything like it. You've proven that advanced civilization doesn't require the suppression of emotion, it requires the integration of emotion with wisdom." "But will it be enough?" Eleanor asked, watching the Nexus's approaching form through the transparent dome. The massive construct now dominated the night sky, its ancient surface reflecting starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive. "We're about to find out," Nyxera answered as the air began to hum with energy. The Nexus arrived at midnight, positioning itself in Earth's orbit with impossible precision. Its surface shifted, revealing patterns that made Nyxera's fins stand rigid with recognition. "Those are first one scripts," she whispered. "They're activating." Light engulfed the earth, not blinding, but revealing. Every human felt it, a presence vast and ancient, examining not their technology or their sciences, but their hearts. Their capacity for connection. Their ability to grow beyond fear and embrace the unknown. In that moment, Eleanor understood. This was never about quarantine or evaluation, she said, watching the Nexus pulse with new colors. This was about finding a species that could bridge the gap, between emotion and logic, between different forms of life. The first ones weren't testing our technology. They were testing our capacity for understanding, Nyxera finished, her patterns matching the joy in Eleanor's voice. And humanity has just changed everything. The Nexus's response came not in words, but in transformation. Across Earth, new structures began to grow, organic technological hybrid facilities that merged human innovation with Xylaxian biotechnology. But more importantly, humans discovered they could now see the emotional patterns of others, while Xylaxians found themselves experiencing the vibrant intensity of human feelings. Talvon, watching from their ship, displayed patterns of disbelief. The first ones, they've modified both species. This is unprecedented. No, Eleanor said, taking Nyxera's hand and marveling at how their shared bioluminescence created new, impossible colors. This is evolution. Not away from emotion, but toward deeper understanding. All because of a dinner invitation. The simplest acts of connection, Nyxera agreed, her pattern synchronizing with Eleanor's newfound luminescence, often have the greatest consequences. 1 year later, Earth had become the center of a new kind of galactic civilization. The planet hosted the first Emotional Intelligence Academy, where species from across the galaxy came to learn the delicate art of balancing feeling with reason. Eleanor and Nyxera served as its first joint directors, their own relationship a living example of the harmony possible between different forms of life. And every evening, without fail, they shared dinner together, marveling at how a simple invitation had opened the door to humanity's greatest adventure. In the end, it wasn't humanity's technology that changed the galaxy, it was their capacity to reach across the divide, to feel deeply, to connect genuinely, and to choose understanding over fear. The stars above Earth now shone on a civilization that had learned its greatest strength lay not in suppressing its heart, but in letting it lead the way to wisdom. And somewhere in the depths of space, the first one's Nexus continued its journey, seeking other species ready to learn that same profound truth.